One. All right, Patreon members, we have the privilege of talking to Mr. Jared Ordis from the Southern Oddities podcast, and also from the Even the Podcast is Afraid podcast, which is really cool. And he does all sorts of stuff. But anything else you would want to help fill in the blanks for context for the listeners about yourself, Jared?
I live in Central Alabama. I'm a
Okay,
Southerner, as you can tell
nice.
my voice.
Totally.
Yeah, I host Southern Oddities. Been hosting the show since November of 2020.
Okay.
It's still a fairly new show, only a little over 40 episodes in, but talk about everything from cryptids to the paranormal to roadside attractions, just weird oddities
Love
and
it.
weird history within the Southern United States. And then even the podcast is afraid we're about to hit our 100th episode. We're
Wow.
fixing to do a series on the Manson family, but that show has been the main show that I've done for a while, and Southern Oddities has kind of been this little side thing just for me to do that I really enjoy. And but yeah, you can visit ortistudios.com, and it has all of the shows. I run that as well. It's a network and podcast production company.
Fantastic. That's awesome. And I'll be honest, like I found you through the magic of synchronicity and iTunes search because I was like, there's got to be dudes that have talked about the Ozark Howler, and
Yeah,
there's not a lot of dudes that have talked about the Ozark Howler. So I was like, I'm gonna go for it, and I'm glad that we connected because it sounds like you're a very cool dude from what I've heard so far, Jared.
appreciate it.
Um, but yeah, so let's talk about this Ozark Howler. So what's the deal with this guy? How would you explain him?
He's folklore, obviously. I mean,
Okay.
I would say if you're looking towards, Bigfoot, which I know that's mainly what you talk about on Bigfoot Society, but the Ozark Howler is not necessarily, when you think and you hear of the name, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Something that howls, maybe.
Like a werewolf, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But
Yeah.
he's not even a werewolf. He's a bear.
Okay. Okay.
He's a bear with horns. I mean, he's
Ooh.
had other names too. I mean, they call him the Ozark Howler. He's called the Ozark Black Howler, the Hoo Hoo, the Nightshade Bear, and the Devil Cat. I mean,
Dang.
he's not just situated. I mean, obviously he's situated within the Ozark Mountains, but it's not just Arkansas. He's also been reported in Missouri and Oklahoma and Texas,
Oh wow.
all along the Ozark, the mountain. So he's not just an Ozark or an Arkansas legend. I think Arkansas is mainly where he has come out of the
Okay.
stories. And he's, has red glowing eyes. And, honestly, there's also some stories with Daniel Boone, who had also reportedly had seen him. I don't know if you've ever heard.
Oh wow. No,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I haven't like dug deep into this guy
Hmm.
because as you said, my focus kind of is in Bigfoot, but for the Patreon, we kind of go into other things, which
Yeah.
is kind of a nice palate cleanser at times. But just the image of a bear with horns is pretty crazy, dude. And like
Yeah.
I love when our nation's history intersects with cryptids. Like I'm thinking Teddy Roosevelt in the Bigfoot stories and like
Hmm.
Daniel Boone weirdness. And like, dude, I'm gonna have to look more into
Well,
this guy for
here's the
sure.
thing with Daniel Boone.
Okay.
Daniel Boone supposedly in the early 1800s in Missouri actually purportedly killed it with his gun, and there's different versions of the story. There's of how he did it or where he did it or so on and so forth. But supposedly he killed the beast and kept it as a trophy. So supposedly Daniel Boone
Whoa.
had the Ozark Howler, but of course there's nothing to back that up.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. How how far back do these sighting reports go?
Some of it goes back mainly through the 1800s, but there's
Okay.
also some stuff, especially when you get into Native Americans. Native Americans
Mm-hmm.
also have stories of Bigfoot. So then
Yep.
you also have the same type of story with the Ozark Howler. I don't really know what they called it. The Ozark Howler is like the first reported name of what they called it. The Ozark Black Howler. Uh,
Hmm.
you can find like some people who have drawn images of it online, but it's just a gigantic bear, biggie shaggy hair, red glowing eyes, and horns that come from the
Jeez.
front and go back, almost kind of like a what do you call those sheep? The that have the horns that
Oh,
go.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. I know it's I don't know the name, but I know what you're talking about. They're
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, yeah.
sort of those type of
Dang.
horns.
Yeah. Is something that's still seen today, or was it primarily back in the day?
The last really officially recorded sightings was really in the 1950s. They had some stuff back
Interesting.
then. But most people today think it's an eastern cougar or a black bear sighting that people are seeing. But the weird thing about that is that cougars are not common
Mm,
within that area of the Ozark Mountains. Now here in Alabama, like we have, like your mountain lions,
okay.
which would be basically cougars. Um, but within that area where he is predominantly seen, cougars are not common. But there has
Hmm.
been cougars reported. So there are people who maybe have mistaken it for a cougar, or possibly mistaken for a black bear, which is quite possible because I mean
Okay.
he's a bear cryptid, so it could actually be a black bear.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And maybe he had like a stick on his head or something by some weird happenstance. It's like, look at the horns on that
Oh,
bear.
they've even said there's people that have speculated that he's a bison or a wild boar.
A
Uh,
bison.
Even a hyena has been thrown out there before.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
like what the fuck is a hyena going to be doing in the Ozark Mountains? But I mean,
Well, we just last week I talked to Devin, and there's another cryptid that is Shunka Workin, where some people think that's a hyena as well. But that's more in Montana.
Montana.
And
See,
some
I don't
people are
know
like,
much
it's
of
a
the
big
stuff up
wolf.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. But very interesting. So what kind of did you find any resources that go into this particular cryptid when you were doing research for the episode you did on this?
Yeah, I did. I had, of course, Wikipedia has, you know,
Mm-hmm.
some cryptids are on Wikipedia, but then I take that back. Cryptids fandom is a good one to where you can find
Yeah,
some really good
that's a
stuff
good
there
one.
as well. There's also another place called unlocktheozarks.org. That's
Okay.
another one. Or only in Arkansas. I went to their website as well. They had some stuff. Or another good resource for Southern history is literally called exploresouthernhistory.com,
Okay.
and they have some stuff as well. And then of course, if you just type in the Ozark Howler, it's going to pull up
Mm-hmm.
several different
Yep.
websites, and most of them look like they're from the beginning of the .com era. So they're not like they're not as mainstream, I guess you should say, as something like Nessie or Bigfoot or the
Right.
Chupacabra or something of that nature.
Right. Totally. I think I saw it mentioned. It was like mentioned in Cryptozoology A to Z, which is like
Yeah,
that's because it goes over everything.
yeah.
Uh
You talking about the book, right?
yeah, the book, yeah, by
Yeah,
Lauren Coleman. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good resource definitely to have. Um so your personal thoughts on this, you think are you think we're dealing with a real cryptid here or something what do you think?
Well, up front, I am a skeptic and a
Mm-hmm.
believer, so I'm right
Okay,
in the
cool.
middle. So
Yeah, cool, cool.
there's certain things that I do believe, like Bigfoot. I believe in Bigfoot. There's something there.
Mm-hmm.
This cryptid, Ozark Howler, I don't believe. I don't. I
Mm.
think it's more of a folklore because you got to think German immigrants came into that area within the 1840s, 1850s,
Oh,
and they
snap.
brought
Okay.
along some of that folklore. There's
Yep.
also, I think it was in British folklore, if I'm not mistaken, the um, the dark dog of death.
Hmm.
Heard of that one? Or the
I know.
church
Well, I've heard of
grand,
like different black dogs come up in different folklore. To kind of a
kind of like
theme
the
over there. Yeah.
hellhound type of
Right.
cryptid type of thing.
Okay.
So you got to think some of that came over at the same time as most of these sightings or the stories really started going back in the 1800s. So it's
Mm-hmm.
possible that that folklore came over because back then people used to make up folklore to get their kids to come in the house because it's
That's
getting
funny.
dark
Yeah.
or get off the damn
Right.
streets, you get off the dirt road at that point. But I don't believe that it's real.
Hmm.
I think it's just a story.
All right.
It's a folklore, but I think it's a cool folklore. A bear with horns.
It
I mean,
is. I mean, man.
made
Um,
for a great horror movie, which has probably been done.
I don't know. It be a cool design for Jonathan Dodd to draw up. That guy's rock. I don't know if you follow that guy, but you check him out. He makes some cool designs, and yeah, bear with horns would make a cool design for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, well, yeah. Um, it's one
If
of the
you
ones where I'm
if
not
any of
gonna
the
die in a
listeners
mountain
want to
over.
listen to the story about Ozark Howler, it's episode 24 on Southern Oddities.
Totally. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I will definitely link that in the show notes for that. So that takes care of the Ozark Howler, but you
Yeah.
mentioned before, and this one is kind of cool, that you have some thoughts on another cryptid down there, which is the Alabama white thing. That's more in your
Yeah.
area. So
That
what are
is
your
more of my era. Yeah.
yeah, what's up with
It is
that
a
guy?
Bigfoot creature. Okay. It's
Mm,
now I do have an episode of that as well on Southern Oddities, and I do share some of my encounters. I've had two encounters with this creature.
oh really?
It's been, yeah, one of them I saw it, and the other one is I heard it. So both of them take place within when I was ninth grade. I went camping with some friends, about three or four of us, and we were staying in what's called the B14 area of where I live, which is Slap Out, Alabama.
Mm.
I know it's a weird name.
Just slap out Alabama. That's
Slap Out,
rocking, dude.
Alabama.
Yeah.
Um, and there's always been stories, and what I can get from this is it's been since the 60s is
Mm.
where a lot of these stories started, and people used to talk about there's this creature that lives in the woods. And there's also stories of the Alabama white thing being up in North Alabama,
Okay.
going more towards the Tennessee Alabama line. And
Mm.
then you also have stories within Central Alabama of him as well. But he is a Bigfoot creature that is completely white, almost like
Wow.
you would say Yeti, I guess you would say.
Okay.
But the two events that I had happen, one, ninth grade, going camping. There is a creek that we would stay at down there. It had a little peninsula. You were kind of surrounded by the creek, and we would go down there and stay the night. Well, we had the weird happening of we would hear this howl, like the
Mm.
Bigfoot howl, almost sounds like a
Yeah.
woman screaming. We heard that, screamed out loud. We and it would howl for however many people were at the camp. So
Wow.
that's the other weird thing, is that you're
Okay.
talking about intelligence at this point. So
Ooh.
there was three of us there that first time, and it howled
Okay.
three times.
I've never heard that craziness. That's wild, dude.
But here's the weird thing: it howled
Okay.
every hour. So it started around
Mm,
midnight, then
yeah.
around 1 a.m., then around 2 a.m., and it didn't do it again. We went back a second time, 2 weeks later. There's four of us this time. It howled four times. But one of the people that I was staying with, he actually took a stick and threw it, because at this time we're thinking they thought the woods were haunted, because we had found there's some weird shit in those woods anyways. There's abandoned cars. We found a tombstone split in half with a woman named Bonnie Brown. And we found both sides and connected them back together, and they were on opposite sides of the woods. There were
Mm-hmm.
shoes from the 1930s in those woods. It's a
Wow.
weird place. It also has a dark history within those woods as well, going back to the civil rights stuff as well. Uh,
Okay.
but that time he threw the stick, something threw back. So
Oh man.
we heard the stick throw, and then we heard something throw back, and it hit the creek.
Mm.
So it didn't come where we were. And then we went several times, and it always got the howling. Well, about the time I was around 16, almost 17 years old, my sister used to do competition cheerleading. She was on
Okay.
ESPN and did all that stuff. Well, I had to go pick her up. My mom was dating a man who lived in what's called Tallahassee, Alabama. And there's a long stretch of road, Highway 14. And Highway 14 is a lot of trees. You have a couple of houses spread here and out. And I picked her up one night after practice. It was about 8 o'clock night. We're driving up 14 and we see this tall white walk off. My sister
No
screamed.
way.
I will never
Oh
forget the
man.
scream. I hit my
Mm,
foot on the pedal as fast, you just like, holy
wow.
shit, you
Yep.
go. Can't explain it. So the only thing I can explain is the Alabama white thing. Told my mother about it, and she's like, "It's probably white trash bags." I said, "If that's the case, then we got a fucking trash bag
Mm,
cryptid running around in the
you
woods."
got a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the two experiences, and we have never forgot it. Me and my sister, I actually mentioned it to her the other day because it's been so long ago. And when I came back that night, like I drove back because I had to drop my sister off, and then I drove back down 14 in the same spot that I saw what I saw walk into the woods. There was no white trash bags. There was nothing white there. So there's no way to
Oh yeah.
explain it. I wasn't on drugs, you know. So that's the only thing. And you're talking about this thing was huge. I'd
Yeah. I
probably
was
say in
gonna
the
ask
ballpark
you.
7.5, 8 foot
Okay.
tall. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Um, do you remember so you obviously saw the hair was white.
Oh yeah,
Do you remember anything else about, is it like long hair or anything weird like
it
that?
was
Or
long.
okay.
It was long, and when it was walking down, it didn't even turn and look.
Hmm.
Didn't even turn and look. It was literally walking. Like when somebody's like going down a little because you're on the road, and then it goes down like this into the woods. Like when
Mm-hmm.
somebody's walking down and they're like kind of striding a
Yep.
little bit, but not trying, like not to fall, basically.
Yep.
That's what it was kind of like going into the woods. Never turned around, never did nothing, just kept going.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Never even gave us a
crazy.
notice. I was just like, wow.
Dude, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
obviously that cryptid is still being seen today because you have personal, you know, stories. But is there a long history of the Alabama white thing in Alabama then?
There is. Most
Okay.
of the books that you pick up around here that have some sort of paranormal or cryptid book that's local,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to have the Alabama white thing in it. Um, what's interesting about that is that those two woods, the woods I stayed in
Mm.
and the woods on Highway 14, they connect.
Mm.
So that's the other side of the thing where I'm like, okay, well, and obviously I
Dude.
believe that there's not just one. I believe that you have several. I believe that they
Oh,
breed
sure.
so that they're going to
Exactly.
have offspring. So it's not a lot of people. I haven't heard anybody really talk about it. I mean, we've talked about it um, from us camping and that type of thing, but I've never heard anybody else tell me. Now, my uncle told me this story, and his best friend had also had an experience back in the 80s
Mm.
with it, where he saw it walk across the road in the B14 area on his way home around 2 o'clock in the morning. So,
Wow.
and they they
That's
they talk
crazy.
they used to talk about it more. They said in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people that lived back in the beat, the
Okay.
beat is woods. I mean, that's what it is. And they would hear these loud screaming, howling noises late at night, and they couldn't explain it because it's not a bobcat. There's no bobcat that I know that makes that loud of a scream. And when I'm talking about a loud of a scream, I'm talking about so loud the birds fly out of the trees.
Jeez.
So
Man.
how do you explain that?
Dude, you gotta get hooked up with this Jonathan Odom. His stories are very um they're they have similarities.
Yeah.
So I definitely like the thing you've said about like woods being full of weirdness down there.
Hmm.
That's his stories too, and it's like there's some weird stuff that's going on down in Alabama. I heard that from both of you guys, and like he's heard like he's got this video where it's just like a woman screaming. There's some weird stuff going on down there,
There
but
is it,
definitely
that
check him out.
part back there in the beat, those woods, man. I'm telling you, there's some weird shit back there.
Mm-hmm.
There really is. There's, I mean, I can't tell you because we used to go into the woods, especially during the day. We didn't go walking around there at night, but during the day, there you'd find all kinds of things. I mean, it would just be a treasure trove of things. And most of the
Mm.
cars that you find, they're 40s, 1940s, 1950s,
Wow.
1960s. They're rust buckets, but you know, how? How did those cars just wind up out there in the middle of the woods? Or how do these piles of shoes from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s just wind out up? I mean, it's just weird shit. I mean, we found washers and dryers out there.
That's wild.
Like, who goes and puts
Yeah.
washers and dryers in the middle of the woods?
Oh man, that's crazy. um, for any sometimes in certain state cryptids, there's like really niche resources.
Yeah.
Are there any that come to mind or anything like that regarding Alabama White Thing? If nothing comes to mind, don't worry about it. But sometimes you can find some crazy resources.
Some of the local news has covered Alabama White Thing here.
Okay.
There's also, I mean, you could type it in, you'll pull up some stuff. There's not a whole bunch. Most of the stuff that you'll find is going to come from word of mouth, or you're going to find it in one of the local books or tales there. Like I had mentioned to you before we started recording, Bigfoot Bob, which I'm friends with out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Yep.
He had never heard of it.
Oh, wow.
He had never heard of it. It's more centralized to here in North Alabama.
Okay.
He had never heard of it, and I had told him all about it, and he wants to come down here and go to the B14 woods and try to see what he can capture. And I told him, I said,
cool.
if you go, you're going to get screams. I can tell you that straight up. You're going to get them, because it never failed us. Every time we went, we got them. And about 2 years ago, the guy's property that we were staying on, they went camping, and he wrote me on Facebook and said, "Hey, those screams still happen, by the way."
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's still happening.
Goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a different viewpoint of the Alabama White Thing than I had. So I'm glad we talked about that as well. But man,
but he's not as bulky now.
Oh, really?
No, he's more of a slender Bigfoot.
Okay.
He's not like your California Bigfoot, like your Sasquatch.
No, he's not.
There.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally different. They're like, they think they're cousins. That's the whole story, is like, it's got to be a cousin of the Bigfoot.
Well, I mean, it's weird how different parts of the US, like, you usually look at the skunk ape in Florida being totally different look than, your guy in Alabama or your guy in Northern California. And then you've got a white one up in Northeast Pennsylvania that's been cited as well, which that guy, there's some creepy stories about that guy up in Pennsylvania. But yeah, it's wild. Different parts of the US might have different types of Bigfoot. Who knows? So
yeah.
Jared, this has been a super fun conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Our voices have held out so far.
They have.
So I think this is good. But do you mind going over again the best way that the listeners can follow you and keep up to date with what you're doing?
Oh yeah, you can go to ordisstudios.com. That's okay. Cool. ORDIS studios.com. You can also follow Southern Oddities if you want, at Southern Odd Pod on Twitter and on Instagram. If you want to listen to Even the Podcast is Afraid, all the links and stuff are there as well on the website. The website literally has all the links for everything.
Perfect. Yep.
Cool. You can follow me on Twitter as well at Jared_Ordis.
Awesome. Very good. Jared, it's been fun chatting with you, and it's good to meet you. And let me know if there's anything I can do to help in the future, for sure.
So. Thanks for having me, Jeremiah. I appreciate it.
You got it.